Hello everyone, my name is Joshua and this is the 183rd video on my video journal series. Today's date is Monday the 10th of August 2026. How's everyone been? I've been pretty good, thank you. And today I just stayed at home. I didn't really do much, just stayed at home, did some homework, flipped through the news. But something I've been seeing a lot lately in the news is the media's portrayal of Gen Z. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean the very much forced narrative that the media portray of Gen Z when it comes to everyday life, school, Gen Z's obsession with this fabulous quote unquote new TikTok trend. Gen Z are flocking towards this country. Gen Z spend a lot of money. They're obsessed into this. They want to do that. Their literary skills, their grammar skills are all in the decline, that Gen Z are doomed, sort of thing. And I'm quite sick of it. I wouldn't say it's like inherently, I guess, all positive or all negative, but very much feels forced because the people writing these articles, they're, well, not a part of Gen Z typically. They'll usually be, Gen X or Gen Y or even baby boomers. And for this video, I'll be talking about Gen Z, those born between the years 1997 and 2012. Now, I'm part of Gen Z. I was born in 06. My older brother and younger sister, they're both part of Gen Z as well. And I feel like I can talk as a Gen Z about like my feelings when it comes to this. And obviously, I'll be focusing on the news. I won't be really focusing much on the other side of the media, such as TV, films, and music. I'm very much someone who listens to Gilbert O'Sullivan and Gilbert and Sullivan. So I wouldn't really know any music beyond what your parents listen to. I'm sorry, I'm very much a boomer when it comes to my tastes, or I guess Gen Xer. But I've been yet again just seeing a lot of headlines about Gen Z, even Gen Alpha. Because the oldest member of Gen Z hasn't even hit their 30s yet, as of me recording this video. And yet the youngest member, right, those born in 2012, the youngest person born in 2012 will be 13 years and a couple or so months. I'm not bothered to do the calculations right now, I'm sorry. Obviously, you got like Gen Alpha and, their media portrayal as well. And I guess I'll be sort of dipping into that because especially when it comes to literary skills, right? Being able to use a pen and paper, that's something I've heard the media report a lot on, like how Gen Z can't even use a pen and paper, Gen Alpha. I'll give you an example. Here in Australia, we have this test called NAPLAN. It is a test that you do every 2 years whilst you're in school. So you do it you start it in like primary school, right? I think it's like kindergarten or year one, and then you slowly do it every 2 years, right? So let's say you're in seven, you do the NAPLAN exam whilst you're in year seven, and then you do it again whilst you're in year nine. That is for high school at least. And I remember doing NAPLAN. It's basically a test that doesn't actually go towards your grade, I believe. It just goes towards the Australian government so then they can see, all right, well, we need to put more resources into math. We need to put more resources into English, because judging by student scores, they're, particularly low. And obviously, I remember when I did the NAPLAN exam, at least in high school, year 7 and 9, on a laptop. I think in primary school we did it with a pen and paper. But basically, well, from what I've been hearing, this year's NAPLAN's results were so low that the media's been talking about how kids should resume to using a pen and paper to like write correctly, use correct grammar, for even like basic math skills because they say, oh, Gen Z and Gen Alpha are doomed. They don't know how to use a standard pen and paper, that sort of thing. Like the older generation just looking down on the younger generation. And obviously, stats don't lie. I guess there has been a decrease in people's ability to write correctly and to use correct grammar and punctuation because our reliance on autocorrect has dinosaur. But I'm just yet again though. I just see those headlines. Like Gen. No, I'm not even kidding you. This was a headline I saw like 1 or 2 days ago on like I think it was Sunrise. Um, that was like, Gen Z's IQ has been significantly decreased. That Gen Z's IQ compared to the older generation is like much, much lower. And I'm just like, oh my god, I can't believe it. But yet again, it is Sunrise. It's not really proper news. It's just, what your mom and dad watch while you're waking up at like 7 o'clock in the morning. But I just don't like how I guess the older generation constantly look down on the younger generation or view them. Um, I mean, same thing happened to millennials, Gen X, baby boomers, silent generation. You can even go back to the ancient Greeks. Where you had like the elders looking down on the kids. All they want to do is just write poetry and read books all day. They should be building our temples and fighting in wars, sort of thing. I mean, that sort of thing continues now. Just replace books with video games and war with war. But um, that one's not going to slide well. But it did happen. I feel like the whole this is going to be a while back, but the whole like national service thing in the UK, right? I remember when Rishi Sunak tried um, pushing that one through, and I'm just like, well, you know, as if he wasn't already so unpopular as PM, he had to promote that policy. But I really do mean it, like who's better to talk about Gen Z than Gen Z? The media is heavily concentrated by the older generations. Not enough younger people are involved within the media, unfortunately. And it could be due to our age, but it can also be due to the fact that, well, you know, I guess, the field is already dominated by all these, like, well established and senior executives and senior journalists and all that. If you really want to get the voice of younger people, you need younger people. You can't just have the older generation basically, stirring up bad press or just constantly, like giving a false perspective on the younger generation. Um, what I talked about with that plan, how kids' results are declining in terms of their ability to write and their mathematical skills and all that. Well, obviously, you should be, well, basically looking at those statistics and going, all right, well, what needs improvement? Maybe it's not just solely because of the computers. Maybe it's because of parenting. Maybe it's because, um, you know, Gen Z's, or if you're a child born within the Gen Z generation, your parents are most likely, Gen X. Maybe you have to look towards the older generation to understand the newer generation sometimes, at least when it comes to the quote unquote issues and, the doomed aspect of Gen Z, which I really hate using, but yeah, I don't think it's purely Gen Z's fault that, these things are occurring. It could be a product of the older generation, at least some people within the older generation. I hate to group everyone in a specific group like that. But everyone likes to say, "Oh, baby boomers, they locked us out of the housing crisis." Well, obviously, there were a lot of boomers who bought up housing, and there's a lot of rich boomers out there in the world. But there's also not every boomer's, I guess, well off, if you know what I mean. I really hate, yet again, I'm using that catch-all term, but same thing with, I guess, millennials. You see millennial voices dominated within the media. At least like the millennial perspective, I'll say that the millennial perspective dominated in, news media, television, radio, films, and all of that, video games. But Gen Z, right? Like I said, we have even hit our 30s, so we're all like, you know, young. We haven't like really put our foot in the door yet, and we can't really like override this sort of media portrayal of us as like reckless and carefree, basically rage bait to get like the older generation to click on these articles and go like, when I was your age, I saved up 10,000 Australian pounds for a home loan and we liked it, sort of thing. Not that my generation could afford a house anyway, but I feel like, um, instead of making all these like clickbaity articles or reporting about Gen Z's quote unquote obsession with a online trend or traveling to this place, or the fact that they can't read or write, or the fact that quote unquote fact that you know this is all our problem, or Gen Z are doomed to fail from the start. I feel like the media, or at least media portrayal of Gen Z, should be Gen Z are capable of doing this. If they work hard, they can do that sort of thing. It's like, obviously we have a lot of my generation, we have a lot of challenges ahead of us, but I feel like it should be a strengths-based approach. Gen Z are more skilled in doing this than baby boomers. One example, social media. I guess nearly every member of Gen Z would have used social media at least one point in their life. They know how to communicate on social media. That is a positive aspect, something that I guess the older generation can't do as well. But it can also be a detriment, social media. And I guess you hear um, you know, things about Gen Z and the addiction to social media, which is a very much a real thing. All right, it is a real thing. Addiction to online media platforms, and that's one of the challenges that Gen Z face. Screen time. I guess even like just I guess, yeah, like overuse of technology. I guess technology is becoming a increasingly more prominent thing within our lives, even if it may not be integrated all that well. The rise of AI is something that Gen Z have seen. AI within the workplace, trying to even get a job, which I still struggle with today. Um, those are the challenges. But I feel like the media sort of blow this thing out of proportion. Like, obviously these are real concerns, but they make it seem like, oh, Gen Z, we can't do anything about it. We just have to like, admit that we're quote unquote inferior to the older generations. That that we're just a bunch of like carefree hippies on social media playing games or whatever. But I've met people around my age, Gen Z. Some of them are really, really, really smart, and they have a lot in their future. I can tell it. I can tell it. And even Gen Alpha, people say, oh, Gen Alpha slang, they're doomed. They're the iPad kids. And I'll admit, right, I was an iPad kid, even as someone born in 2006. I was an iPad kid. I was gifted an iPad on, I think it was when I was like 5 years old. And I played a lot of games on my iPad. I used YouTube. I explored the web at a very young age, and I came out just fine. In fact, my mum says, Josh, he's helpless. As a joke, obviously. That, oh, you can't do the dishes, Josh. What do you do, lounge around all day? But apart from that, my mum, she says, oh, Josh, you'll be successful in life. I'm not like someone committing violent crime on the streets or robbing banks because I was an iPad kid, or I'm someone who can't use basic vocabulary. Like, I just turned out fine. But yet again, though, my parents, they were strict on me. On how much time I could spend on the iPad. Um, and obviously, kids need to experience the real world and not constantly on their screens. But that comes through parenting, something that the older generation are responsible for. And to synthesize things together, it's not always Gen Z's fault that a particular thing happens, and just let us live our lives. And I think people who avoid these clickbaity articles because they know, like, they're just a bunch of BS. At least most of them will understand what I'm talking about. It's endemic to every generation that they want to act quote unquote superior to the younger kids, the younger generation. And the media giving, I guess, quote unquote, a one size fits all sort of view of Gen Z. But Gen Z encompasses a lot of people, right? People born in 1997 are going to be completely different to those born in '06 or 2011, right? One generation was born in the '90s, in a much different era. Born like before, the iPhone, right? Born before the iPhone, most probably spent their like early high school with no social media basically, or very limited presence on social media. Then you got people born around my year '06. We started using social media, um, even before we reached high school. Technology was very much a thing even when we were in kindergarten, and then Gen Alpha, um, and I can't really give the perspective of Gen Alpha, someone born in Gen Z, but they're more, I guess, accustomed to technology than even I am. And this is all going to ring true, right? This is all going to ring true in around 20 years or so, where there'll be a great sort of shift, right? The 20 years from now, the oldest members of Gen Z will be nearly 50 years old. Those born in, I guess, the tail end of Gen Z, those born in 2012, let's see, they're around 13 years if you're born at the end of 2012 as of me recording this. So it'll be, yeah, they'll be basically within their early 30s, right? So basically, everyone in Gen Z 20 years from now will be over the age of 30. And, I feel like Gen Z voices will become much more prominent in the future. Currently, right now, I feel like it's baby boomers and millennials whose voices are heard a lot within the news media, and those like people who write those articles. Um, Maybe a little bit of Gen X as well. But I feel like when it comes to Gen Z, it will be our quote unquote time to shine, or at least we will gain more prominence or more of a voice or more, I guess, of a presence within writing the media in maybe 20 years. It could be 10 years or so. And I have faith in my generation. I don't believe those news articles where it says Gen Z or Gen Alpha uh, you know are dumb, or their IQs have decreased. I don't believe in that. I believe Gen Z and Gen Alpha will have great potential in the future. And I read somewhere that Gen Z is the apparently the kindest generation out there, but it could be due to the fact that young people will tend to be more. I guess it depends what age I'm talking about, but can lean towards being more kinder than I guess the older generation, or more willing to help out, volunteer, and stuff like that. Yet again, though, I'm just speaking in terms of like things that I read about a while back, but um, yeah, like Gen Z, it feels, I guess, refreshing actually to talk to someone from my generational cohort, because I speak a lot with older people, and I can tell like in some aspects, right, when it comes to issues such as housing or technology, that they're a little bit out of touch. They pretty much only know how to use Facebook. Oh, I created a meme off Facebook. Do you think this is funny? Sort of thing. And I find it charming. But, speaking to someone from my generation, even if I have outdated music tastes, I can resonate a lot with them. We can connect. And I have, yet again, great potential for Gen Z. And if I really had to end this video off with a positive message when it comes to Gen Z's portrayal in news media, is that, well, I'd say don't believe what the titles say. Click on the article if you really want to grab the context. But, I feel like it is pretty much forced, that the media want to constantly portray us as reckless, young, at least most sectors of the media portray Gen Z as young, but like dumb sort of thing, and um, that Gen Z, like they wouldn't get this sort of thing. They don't know how to do basic things, let alone change a tire. I feel like they just take, issues that Gen Z are facing, but they really amplify it to an extent that, they make us seem helpless, that it's our fault. Well, that is not always the case. Yet again, I don't want to blame, I guess, constantly the older generation, like what they do to, I guess, us. But, um, sometimes it could be why these things are happening because of the older generation or some people within the older generation that, you know, prominence of the older generation within news media and, parents of these kids, parents of Gen Z. But I feel like, you know, this thing yet again, it just happens with time. That yeah, I think it's happened with like pretty much every generation. I just feel like now because we live in the online world, it's becoming more, I guess, quote unquote, apparent. Back in the day, the things that I guess made the news were really quote unquote newsworthy. Now you can just write like pretty much anything on the internet and post it, and you can say, "Oh, I changed my brand of toothpaste." That could be news nowadays. Um, but I feel like just reading all these articles, looking on what's ever on television, I don't really see a authentic sort of Gen Z perspective. Well, at least rarely I see a Gen Z perspective when it comes to these sorts of matter and issues. And as someone, if you're part of Gen Z and you're watching this video, I want you to, if you can, write down in the comments down below and how you feel about the sort of news media portrayal of Gen Z. That do you feel irritated by it, or do you just think it's funny, or you feel like maybe Gen Z will gain a more, I guess, prominent voice within the news media in the years to come? Oh, I really like to hear your. Excuse me. I burped because I had a very nice dinner not so long ago, but yeah, I want to hear your thoughts. And yet again, though, if I'm going to close all these books about my rants today, um, yeah, well, that's pretty much everything moved to the side now. But yeah, I don't really have much else to talk about other than, I have to go through tomorrow. Good old uni. um, but yeah, I guess, you know, at least when I'm in uni tomorrow, I can speak with a bunch of like people in my class around my age and get to know what they're doing. And maybe I'll ask them that question. What do you think about the news media's portrayal of Gen Z? Maybe I'll do that. But anyway, I guess I'll catch you all later, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye. See you. Take care. Stay awesome, and have a great one. Bye.